March 10th, 1989. Spring break. Thousands of students all over the nation are rushing out of their classrooms in search of relaxation and fun. This would be the case for 21-year-old UT student Mark Kilroy. Mark and two other friends had just finished up some college exams and were on their way to celebrate at South Padre Island, a very popular spring break destination in the country where more than 50,000 people attend every year. After a foggy 9-hour drive, they finally arrived shortly before midnight. They checked in at Sheraton Hotels and Resorts, where later that evening they partied until the next morning. Before arriving to South Padre, the group had made plans to drive over to Matamoros, Mexico, which wasn't too far away. When they arrived, Matamoros was flooded with more than 15,000 spring break tourists. The sidewalks and nightclubs were packed with foreign tourists looking to enjoy cheap alcohol with the help of Mexico's lax drinking laws. As the night progressed, Mark and his friends spent the evening bar hopping and socializing with fellow college students. Eventually, the group separated and Mark sat on a bench while his friend Bill ran over to an alley to pee. When Bill came back, he noticed Mark had disappeared and was nowhere to be seen. Bill and Bradley Moore, the other student who had tagged along on the trip, searched the town for Mark, but to no avail. They eventually left Matamoros and drove back to South Padre in hopes Mark would show up hungover the next morning. But when the sun came up, Mark was still nowhere to be seen. Both Mexican and US authorities worked together and began a massive search for the UT student. On March 26th, the case was highlighted on national television in the crime show America's Most Wanted. This gave the case nationwide attention and generated several phone calls and letters with people giving clues on Mark's whereabouts. However, after a while, the case ran cold with no end in sight. And then, on March 1st, 1989, Mexican state authorities were stationed at a routine checkpoint near Santa Elena when they saw a vehicle run through the checkpoint without stopping. Instead of turning on their police sirens, the police decided to follow the truck using an unmarked vehicle. They were then led to a ranch and pulled off at a distance. After about 30 minutes, the driver that ran through the checkpoint took off from the ranch and headed back to the city. That's when the officers decided to make their move into the ranch. In a quick search, the police discovered cult paraphernalia and marijuana traces. Instead of arresting the driver, the police decided to continue gathering more evidence on the suspected criminal activities at the ranch. Finally, on April 9th, they returned with several other policemen and arrested several people on the ranch. The men arrested were sent to prison, while the police interrogated a caretaker at the ranch. The ranch's caretaker identified Mark through a photograph and stated that he saw him at the ranch. "Yeah," the caretaker told the police, "I saw him," and then he pointed at the shack at the ranch. For the first time in weeks, the case was back on. On April 11th, the police took the caretaker and the 4 other suspects back to the ranch, and it was there where they discovered what happened to Mark Kilroy. The night of his disappearance, when he was left alone on the bench, Mark was lured by a man parked inside a red truck who apparently called him and asked him if he needed a ride. As Mark got close to the vehicle, he was grabbed by 2 men and was wrestled inside the truck. Because of his size and athletic strength, Mark was able to break loose 2 blocks down the road. Mark ran from the truck, but was eventually intercepted by another vehicle and was taken at gunpoint. He was then subdued and handcuffed in the back of the second car. It was later found out that the people who had kidnapped Mark were members of a cult, led by a man named Adolfo Constanzo. The cult ran an enormous drug smuggling business, and in order to be granted immunity from law enforcement, along with wealth and prosperity, would perform human sacrifices and rituals. Mark was kidnapped solely for one of these rituals. They wrapped his face and mouth with duct tape and walked him through a field to a storage cabinet. Throughout the night, Mark was tortured and sodomized. He was then led out to a field, and Constanzo killed him by chopping the back of his neck with a machete. His brain was then boiled in an inanga, an African metal pot that Constanzo used to stew human and animal remains. Mark's legs were then chopped off above his knees to facilitate his burial. A wire was inserted in his spinal cord to pull the bones out once the body decomposed, which was then used as a necklace. The cult members then dug a hole in the grounds and buried Mark's dead body. Once police arrived on scene, they forced the caretaker to reveal to them where they had buried Mark's remains. As they searched the ranch, they soon discovered 14 other bodies, which were also victims that had been used by the cult in sacrifices. Unfortunately, this would be the end for Mark Kilroy and his legacy.